Yeah, I just wanted to quickly give my thoughts on the Watchmen Chapter 1. This is a DC animated film, came out recently. It's the first half of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen. Of course, Alan Moore is not credited in this adaptation. That's how he wants it, as it were. How do I feel about this thing? Well, it's not going to be as comprehensive as that motion comic, or even the motion comic left things out, which is kind of missing the point. Like, go in or go home, right? But anyway, this the thing that everyone is mentioning about this is that it does not capture the power of Dave Gibbons' artwork. It condenses it and sort of, I don't know, shopping mallified. Not shopping mall. It just like it's cleaner and more palatable. It's less kind of grimy and raw. But anyway, so not that it was only those things, but in any instance, I can't help but feel as though they wanted to kind of manicure Watchmen so that it would be palatable for those people who watch the DC animated films of this ilk and haven't necessarily read the graphic novel yet. Now, what's fantastic is that it will encourage a lot more people potentially to read the graphic novel. It's not like the like Zack Snyder film is the most immediately accessible film. It's not a perfect adaptation. In respects, it did some smart things. I have videos already on Snyder's Watchmen and of the motion comic where I discussed the adaptation and the original text in more depth. I watched this recently. I figured I'll do a film on this. Why not? But the voice cast did really well. I was reminded of some of the most powerful moments of the comic, and I had tears welling up again at some of the most powerful moments. Manhattan's monologuing on Mars, for instance, and the comedian approaching Moloch in his room at night. It's an incredibly strong text, and so naturally the power comes through to an extent in this adaptation. Although one thing which I felt as though was not something I would do in an adaptation. It's the artistic license of the adapters, J. Michael Straczynski of Babylon 5 fame and of some comic book credibility. He wrote a bit of Spider-Man and Superman. That, in my memory, I don't think those are the best received works from those characters. Anyway, I've always my take on Ozymandias from the comic book was always that it actually isn't that, and this is what people get confused about that character, and I find it sadistic, this interpretation, almost as sadistic or more so than people who take Rorschach way too seriously. It's not that Ozymandias' idea was the only way to save the planet from nuclear holocaust, Third World War, Cold War going hot. Really, shouldn't Ozymandias, genius that he is, have figured out that once Doc Manhattan finds out that Laurie's father is Edward Blake, that's what it would take for him to realize that life has meaning. Theoretically, at any point, Dr. Manhattan could have disintegrated all the nuclear weapons on the planet. Now, he didn't because the US government didn't want him to, and he was indifferent to the prospect, really, being God, essentially, and not being apathetic to life. But theoretically, if worst came to worst, he could just disintegrate all the nuclear weapons on Earth, or just in the Soviet Union anyway. Who would stop him? And so, what Ozymandias wanted to do was be responsible for saving the Earth. For coddling everyone. Like, oh, you can't take care of yourselves, but I have the secret. They'll never get to know the truth. I'm Ozymandias, tee-hee-hee. No one knows what I'm really thinking, tee-hee-hee. That was the key to Ozymandias' ego was a huge part of it. It wasn't like that really sadistic Reddit interpretation where, Ozymandias had a point. What do you mean Ozymandias had a point? What, we should kill all of New York if it brings about world peace? If someone came up to you and said, kill all of New York and it will bring about world peace, you have to ask yourself, is that really worth it? Probably, maybe not. It's an extensive discussion that needs to be had. And that's part of the intelligence of Alan Moore's insertion and writing composition of Ozymandias, of Adrian Veidt as a character. although I think where the interpretation of the character in the readers' minds is kind of a bit awry is taking a bit too seriously. I think like with Rorschach, Rorschach's not meant to be like a consistent character. He's not meant to be this, immovable object, which, it's like, you can't fault Rorschach, at least he's consistent with his principles. It's not necessarily about that with Ozymandias either. Ozymandias deliberately removed Dr. Manhattan from Earth so that this could all occur. He didn't count on Manhattan return, and that was the one error he made, that he could... Well, that Manhattan would return, but he'd be able to disintegrate him, and this was a failure. But now Manhattan seemed to agree that, he can see the future, so he probably knows that the Ozymandias' plan works in the long run. But the fact of the matter is that it was for ego's sake, and he wanted to have that moment where he told Dan and Rorschach, "Oh, I did it 10 minutes ago." It wasn't that was the only way, it's that's how superheroes think, or that's how he thought anyway. That's how costume vigilantes think. Ozymandias was one of several inevitable psychopathological extensions, inevitabilities of those archetypes. One's Rorschach, one's Doc Manhattan, the Superman, one's the kind of not anarchistic, but like just nihilistic sadism, essentially, of the comedian, the sort of naive, like, sex symbol of Lloyd Jupiter, and then the more kind of crafty idealist of Night Owl is probably the most wholesome example of these guys, although still presented as sort of a bastion of, like, overcompensation for traditional masculine woes or inadequacies, as he might perceive it. Dan Dryberg. Anyway, that's probably enough talking about Watchmen. It's easy to talk about it for a while if I have the time or permission to. Anyway, so I may as well close it here. Thanks everyone, I appreciate it really very immensely. Have the best day, of your life.